and welcome to the Ronan Maher Show with me, Ronan Maher, and my very special returning guest, Sean Walsh. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing brilliant. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm sat here sweating my bollocks off because it's
Too much information.
it's so humid
A
where I am.
simple "I'm fine" would have done.
Well, I apologize for my crudeness, but I
Yeah,
do.
like I care.
I feel like I'm in the jungle right now, and there's no fan or anything
It is
to.
hot, isn't it? Well, you're up north, aren't you?
Yeah, yeah. Is it?
I'm in the southwest. I live in Devizes, and it's hot here. So it must be hot everywhere.
It is. So yeah, I'm kind of can cope with that. I put a fan on just before we spoke, and it's too loud. It's rumbling away in the background, so I had to turn it off. Anyway, what has been
Don't get
going
the
on?
audio wrong this time
No, excuse
with the fan.
excuse that.
That's a private joke, I suppose.
The no, it's okay. I don't mind telling people. This is take two of this conversation, the two-part conversation we set up, and unfortunately, it's take two because I messed up the audio last week, and I ended up with a scrambled recording. So,
Which might have been a better interview.
well, hopefully it won't get to that point. So, Sean, what's been going on?
Well, I've come off Twitter. Made a decision to come off Twitter for various reasons. Because I wasn't. We're going to talk about the homelessness thing, aren't we? At some point. So I'll roll it into that.
That's an interesting combination: Twitter and homelessness.
Well, it's to do with the fact that I'm a recovering alcoholic, and there are certain patterns of behaviour I have to recognise in myself that are warning signals. And when I was on Twitter, I met some good people on Twitter, including yourself and another good friend of mine, and was, you know, and I found it great, but I found myself sniping at people for no reason. So people would, they would tweet stuff, and for no reason I'd think of a sarky comment. And when that happens with me, as a recovering alcoholic, I know there's something wrong there. So I made a decision to come off it. So that's the big thing that's happened with me in the last week. And I miss it. But I've got more work done. So I've written a couple of articles this week, one for Conservatives Global on the alleged second wave, and one for the article, which I'm just finishing off, also on the same thing, but I haven't, and I'm writing something for the Critic on C.S. Lewis. So I've had quite a productive week. And more important than that, the first time in months, there was a knock on our door, because I live with my little boy, who's only 10 years old, and from across the road, other little boys were asking to go out to play. So that was brilliant. That's the highlight of my week, that my little boy is now going out to play with friends.
That's
was that a long-winded answer? You did ask.
No, I wanted a long-winded answer. That's fantastic about your little boy. You know, it's encouraging when you see green shoots of normality at the moment. It really is. It just there's not enough of it, though, is there?
No.
There's not enough of it. I was out for the first time in months on Saturday night. I went to meet a friend in town, or in the city. We call it town, don't we? And it was horrific. Dreadful atmosphere, masks and visors everywhere, giant screens in the air, bellowing out government slogans. As soon as I got into town, I knew I'd made a mistake in going in. I went to meet my friend, and he was there a bit earlier than me, and he was sat outside a bar that we go to quite a bit in normal times. And I had to download an app as soon as I got there. Order a drink online, pay for the drink online, wait for someone to bring it over. There was hardly any choice. I have I'm gluten intolerant, so I'd gotten used to being able to go out and get a gluten-free drink, but of course the selection in shops and bars and restaurants and supermarkets and everything is scaled way back. I mean, I don't want to overstate it. It's not Soviet levels of empty shelves or anything, but anyway,
No.
I had to in the end I had to wait about half an hour just to get one pint of cider, and it was a half-empty bar, 6 p.m.
Yeah.
on a Saturday evening. That cannot continue.
No.
It's not a nice environment to be in. It's oppressive. It's weird and kind of creepy to have someone come up to the table wearing a welder's mask, welder's visor, and surely the numbers don't add up. Surely they don't add up.
No, they
half
don't.
capacity and like a drag on service.
Yeah. Was this a well-known chain that you were attending, or was it just
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a well-known chain. It's just a bar in the middle of Manchester city centre. I don't want to give out about any bar in particular because
No, of course not.
I saw that they were all doing it.
I think what's happened is because I do go to a well-known chain every morning because not every morning, but I take my little boy there for breakfast, and I'm glad that they're open, but it's almost like the staff have internalized the rules. There's a system of rules, and they've internalized them, and they're in there with masks. And if you stand up for too long, they tell you to sit down. I mean, I don't drink, so I'm just going there for the morning. But I'm just thinking, what's this place like in the evening? When they're telling people to sit down, you can't meet with other people from other tables. You know, the bizarro world we have acquiesced to. I'm going to say we've inherited, but we haven't because the public's gone along with it. Maybe we can get onto that point at some point, but that's my biggest gripe about the whole situation is I think we're in a bizarro world that I view the government as being like a child that got a little bit of power and pushes the boundaries, tries to see what it can get away with. And I don't see that the public's pushed back. And I think the situation in pubs and restaurants is a crystallization of that point. In that you should be able to say to so I've got a friend, I won't name him, but who I have a lot of friends who are a little bit not dodgy because I get on with most people, and also because I went through the homelessness thing, which we're going to talk about, are we? But he was told off for standing up in this pub, and he sat down. Now, if you knew what this guy got up to in pubs in the past, you know, including serious fights, you'd think, why are you going along with that? I'm not endorsing fights in pubs, but we've just inherited this kind of awful mindset that because the government says something, we have to go along with it, and it's very, very depressing. And the face mask thing is I think the best expression of that. People walking around like that, it really depresses me. And I refuse to wear one, and I won't.
Yeah, I mean, I
even though
won't either.
Even though perhaps, given my looks, I ought to, but I won't.
You're nothing but a handsome devil, Sean. You shouldn't say that about yourself.
This is audio, isn't it?
Well, I too have a face for audio. I don't wear the mask when I go out. You know, I mean, I'd wear a mask if I was going into a nursing home. I'd wear a mask if I was going into an environment where there were, you know, older, vulnerable people. Or if it's not my home, for instance, I'm going to someone else's home and they're insistent on it, then I'll do it reluctantly, admittedly, but I will do it. But I see the masks as a symptom of a much larger problem in our society with obedience towards government. Actually, it's not just obedience towards it. It is. I really do think that most British people are to some extent besotted with government. I think they love it. I really do. I mean, I'm a small government guy, but I don't for one moment think that I will ever see the kind of things that I want implemented in this country. I don't think it's possible. I even see. Did you listen to Mike Graham and Peter Hitchens this morning?
I listen to Mike Graham every morning. I think he's brilliant.
I like both of them in different ways, but I had to say that I strongly disagreed with them this morning about the migrant crisis in the Channel. Both of them.
I've seen it this morning. What was he saying?
Right. So
I haven't seen it this morning because I was waiting for you to get in touch.
Right. Okay. Basically, we're talking about many things. To begin with, it was COVID, but towards the end, they start discussing the crisis in the Channel right now. And for listeners who don't know, every day virtually every day for months now, we've had dinghies full of migrants coming across the Channel and landing in Dover and Kent and Sussex, and it's whatever the side of this you come down on, it's a big problem. Anyway, Mike and Peter automatically blame Serco, for example, the big corporation Serco.
Yes, yeah. He's been pushing them for the last week or so, hasn't he? He's been pushing Serco.
Yeah.
Sending them questions.
And I've no problem with people asking questions of Serco. That's not my point. Point is that the two of them automatically blame anything but the government, anything but the state. When I would say that the driving force of the problem is state incompetence and unwillingness to do anything about it. But that unwillingness to do anything about it comes primarily from state ideologies like socialism and its variants, and this sort of belief that government is a good thing, And if there's any problems with government, it's because you've got the wrong people in government. It's not that there's something wrong with government in of itself. I strongly disagree with that, and also, Peter Hitchens was saying that the other big problem that's causing the migrants to come across is that we've bombed all these countries and so forth.
Yeah, I did hear that. That was yesterday morning.
Excuse me. I listened to the recording of it. So yeah, it wasn't this morning. Sorry, I said it was on this morning. So you have heard it. Yeah, I'm sorry, but Eritrea is not in Iraq.
No, I thought that was a weird thing to say. I agree with you.
He I don't think he believes it, to be honest with you. Just,
I suppose, because if I remember that part of the conversation, and I think Mike Graham was saying that he was linking the dinghy crossings and all of that to a certain form of big business here. And then Peter Hitchens says, I hadn't made that connection. I thought, okay.
That's right.
And then he said, but I do blame the Iraq war and the Syrian intervention. I thought, okay. Well, I mean, he may be right. I don't know. I mean, because I remember sitting there thinking, I watched it this morning because I watched it on YouTube this morning before I went out. Because that's how much I love Mike Graham. And the Mike Graham Peter Hitchens thing every Monday morning I think is unmissable. I think it's brilliant. But I was thinking, I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't thought of that connection, and I'm not really sure who's right or who's wrong, or everyone's right and everyone's wrong. So yeah, I agree with you.
Look, it's not hard to work. It's not hard to work out that we can just look at the video footage of the and there's lots of high definition footage of the people who are coming across in the boats, and large numbers of them are very clearly not Syrians.
No,
and you can go and anyone who's listening can go and check. There is not a large African population within Syria. There wasn't before the war, and there isn't now. So these people are not coming from Syria. Excuse me. I'm sure some of them are, but this idea that it is Syrians and only Syrians, which is the way the media portrays it, or Iraqis, is false, and it's obviously politically motivated, so that people can say, well, it's our fault. But people coming from places like Bangladesh, Pakistan. I mean, I don't want to live in Bangladesh or Pakistan, to be perfectly frank.
No, and I don't blame anyone for wanting to flee France.
No, it's the people. The people are making very understandable decisions. I don't blame them. I mean, France is a shadow of its former self. So,
although he got the schools back.
Well, yes, which is extraordinary, isn't it? Socialized, unionized France, kids are back in school. And here in Britain, we can.
And I'm still wondering about whether my little boy's going to be back in September.
Yeah, it's quite mad, isn't it? I mean, yeah, we should.
No, I did see that. I did see that discussion, Ronan, and I apologise for saying I didn't, but I think it happened yesterday, didn't it?
Not at all. My mistake.
And I couldn't work out if I thought either of them were right. I didn't quite connect with Mike Graham's analysis of this, which I thought was a bit too simplistic. And I thought that Peter Hitchens' analysis was a bit too global. He was saying that something that's happened 15 years ago, or in the case of, I suppose, Libya 8 years ago, is causing this now. And I'm not really sure I believe that. But anyway, I don't know. I'm no geopolitical expert.
No, nor am I. But I mean, I was just listening to it and thinking, look, I don't blame the migrants for coming across the channel, and I don't blame Serco for applying for government contracts. I don't blame them. What I blame is government and government incompetence and the rabid socialist ideology in this country, which, we were talking earlier about the masks, and and I was saying that I see masks as a symptom of a larger problem, but I see the migrant crisis in the channel and our approach to it as a symptom of that larger problem. I see our deification of the NHS as a symptom of that problem.
That's a problem, yeah.
And it's a big problem, yeah, it really is, and the schools too. Is I think we should talk a little bit about that. It's an appalling situation. I think someone on my Twitter posted an interesting link earlier about Reagan's approach to air traffic controllers striking.
Yeah, he sacked them, didn't he?
Yeah, and it had the desired effect. These people signed contracts saying that they wouldn't strike, and then they went and struck. It's not appropriate, and it's not appropriate for schools to be, and for teachers to be behaving in this way when their job is to teach children. And I mean, the poorest kids in this country obviously are suffering the most. These children cannot be expected to keep up with the middle and upper class kids whose parents can afford tutors, whose parents are themselves perhaps very well educated and able to homeschool them to a certain extent. And these kids are going to fall behind, and in the future we will see, no doubt about it, increases in inequality in society as a result.
My child is. My child is. I don't know if you've got kids. Have you?
I haven't yet, no.
Okay, well, my little boy, Ben, 10 years old, he's the oldest, because he's born on the 5th of September, he tends to be the oldest person in this year. He's a bright little boy. He's not been in school since the 20th of March. Now, I'm probably someone who's capable of homeschooling him, because I've got thousands of books here and because I'm interested in stuff and whatever. But every single day, and I was trying to do that. I'm also 53 years old, so I haven't got that much energy to do it, right? But it's not just about that. It's that every single day during the lockdown, I recognised, because he wasn't with his friends, a certain spark leaving him, which I could not replace. Your dad cannot replace the spark you lose from not being able to play with your friends, and that was the tragedy of it. And if and I'm not sure it is coming down the pipe, because I think that Johnson's resolved about this. But if they say something like the schools can't go back on the 2nd of September, which is when Ben's supposed to be back in school, or it'd be 1 week on, 1 week off, or it's mask in school, I'm going to bite the bullet and homeschool him, because I'm fed up with it. He's had no consistency. It's just been tragic to watch. And it's one of these. I wrote an article in March for a magazine called The Article, in which I said that the way the government is imposing this lockdown, or is a perverse utilitarian calculus, which says that the only thing that matters is illness and morbidity. But it's invisible to them, the stuff that's going to happen. And the stuff that's happened that they haven't spotted, because you can't put it on a government graph, is the spiritual effects on your children. It will be one of them. And I see it every day. And love him though I do, and love me though he does, there is no mechanism of appropriate response for a 53-year-old man to a 10-year-old boy who needs to be growing up and, being with his peers. And it's one of those invisible harms that this government didn't seem to recognise. And so I want the schools open because I want him back with his mates. And if the schools don't open in September, then I'm going to homeschool him and form a support bubble with other people who've taken the same decision.
That's perfectly understandable.
This is a bit of a deal breaker for me.
It's perfectly understandable.
But I'm lucky enough, Ronan, because I can work from home. I can write articles from home and send off 2 articles a week and get enough money for the month. So I'm lucky. But think about all those parents who are not in that situation. And for a teachers' union to suggest that we might do 1 week on, 1 week off, that's just economic chaos, isn't it? How does that work?
Well, it doesn't. I think is the short answer, and the response from government should be, well, if that be the case, we'll pay you 1 week on, 1 week off. I find the idea that people should be paid for not working like this crazy. I really do. There's a crazy article in the Telegraph actually, which doesn't surprise me, to be honest, because the Telegraph has
they've gone squirrely, haven't they?
Fallen from grace somewhat, but
yeah.
Why the battle to get children back to school will be Boris Johnson's Thatcher moment.
Was that Camilla Tominey?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, this is the associate editor.
That's all you need to know,
of the Telegraph. Exactly. Yeah. I think what planet is she on to believe that there is anything remotely Thatcherite in Big Al Johnson's approach to things? This guy is I consider him to be on the left. I know that's not a popular view in this country, but I do consider him to be a man on the left, and I do not think he has what it takes to deal with this problem, because I don't think he fundamentally sees it as wrong, and I don't think he fundamentally sees it as wrong for unions to have the country by the throat like this. And I think it needs that. It needs someone who is unequivocal about the problem, who can say no, I'm not having it. Children need to be in school.
Negotiation, is it?
It's not a negotiation. You don't negotiate with communist unions like this. You don't. You just tell them the kids are going to school. Tough. It is exactly what they are. Yeah. And people say, well, you've got no choice. You do have a choice. You stop paying the members. As Reagan did. But you can't in this country. It's impossible to do things like that because we are many of us in love with the state. We love
The
big
problem
government.
with Johnson is that he's not a conservative, because to be a conservative in the proper sense of the word is to have a certain set of hesitant attitudes towards the world around you. And the stuff that's good that's going on around you is the stuff you want to conserve, hence conservative. What Johnson has done since March is to make it impossible, nearly, for people to smile at each other in public. Now, that's not a conservative prime minister, is it? I mean, he's taken a sledgehammer to the normal forms of human interaction on the basis of very, very bad science. So whether he's right to do that or wrong to do that, I think he's wrong, but I'm not going to call him a conservative. And a headline last week, I can't remember, I think it was either, I think it might have been Rishi Sunak, who held out great promise for a few weeks. But someone else who said that if something happens, we will not hesitate to lock down the country. I thought, well, hang on a minute. You won't hesitate to do it. Surely any conservative would hesitate to do anything like that. But they've lost the plot. They're not conservatives. They're not people who look around at this country and think, this is something to preserve. They look around at this country and they think, on the basis of a virus, the virulence of which we can argue, we use this as an excuse to reorganise people's lives. Now, that's not conservatism, as far as I'm concerned.
No,
I think we've got an ersatz Corbynism going on.
You think we have
an ersatz version of Corbynism? A fake Corbynism going on.
Yeah. I mean, it's because we have a left-wing government. The Conservative Party is a left-wing party, which is why it can take extraordinary decisions with state finances. It's why it can rob future generations of money, which generations that aren't alive. I mean, the founding father of conservatism in this country is Edmund Burke, and of course, Edmund Burke said that we have a contract with those who came before us, those who are alive now, and those who are yet to be born. And it would seem to me that this conservative government could not give a monkey's about people in the future who will be saddled with incredible debts, and it does matter. No sense of history, for sure. That speaks to the problem.
That's the other part of the contract,
the education system, and I think we should talk about that now in a moment. But in terms of the finances, it is deeply immoral to saddle future generations like this, because it does matter. It's this idea, which is a left-wing idea, that you can keep printing money and keep borrowing money, and it won't make any difference, is false. It's not.
Well, true. It means that money doesn't mean anything in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, money, when you think about it, is just a kind of collection of, well, what's the best way of putting it? I don't know what the best way of putting it is. But money requires confidence in money. And if the confidence vanishes, money doesn't mean anything.
Sure. And you end up with shopping trolleys full of it to buy bread.
You get a £5 note that says, I promise to pay the bearer some. That's not money. That's just a promise.
Yeah.
Which is all money is. And if confidence in money vanishes, and, someone was saying the other day that the way this government is going to get out of the debt it's inheriting or generating is to inflate its way out of it, then money ceases to mean anything at that point, because no one has any confidence in it. I'm not an economist, but the metaphysics of money is quite interesting. And it's basically, if people don't believe the piece of paper they're handed, then it doesn't mean anything. And this government's getting itself into a situation where, Rishi Sunak might be sitting in a Cobra meeting going, well, we can borrow this, borrow this, borrow this, borrow this. But at some point, people are going to cotton onto this and realise what's going on here. None of this money means anything. And therefore, money doesn't. I don't know. But this is just a very, not particularly well-developed thought of mine, but it's something that's been occurring to me. recently.
Hmm.
We're going to talk about Roger Scruton.
Yeah, I think we should talk about Roger Scruton, but let's for a moment just stay on education, because it's something that's been irking me in recent days. I have thought a lot about homeschooling for various different reasons. I think that the situation we're looking at right now gives it almost the logic of gravity. But another thing that gives it that logic is the indoctrination in the schools. I mean, you mentioned history. We don't teach history in schools now. Well, they don't teach history the way you would have been taught it, or even the way I would have been. It's now all about seeing things through the prism of colonialism. Obviously, only one type of colonialism, that is to say, that associated with Britain. They don't look at Turkey through the prism of the Ottoman Empire, and it's all about trying to organize society along identity political lines. That is not a proper education, and I do not. I mean, did you see the BBC bite-size white privilege thing in the week? A little video clip that was doing the rounds.
No. No, I did see that with the guy who was saying, yeah, I did see it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just critical race theory gobbledygook, taught as fact in a BBC bite-size little BBC bite-size video for children to learn. So they're having these very crazy neo-Marxist postmodernist ideas pressed on them on a daily basis now, and I haven't got kids yet. I'd like to have them in the future. I can't have that. If I had a school sending that kind of homework back to my house, I would be going in the next day, every day, and saying, "What is this? Why are you brainwashing my child with communist propaganda? I'm not having it."
Yeah, I did that last year when my little boy goes to a Catholic school in Devizes, and it's a good Catholic school in that it's right next door to the Catholic Church, and the values are. We're Catholics, so I'm not expecting everyone to be a Catholic, but you put your child in a Catholic school as a Catholic, you expect it to be Catholic values. He came back last year from school with a bit of homework. It's probably the only bit of homework he's ever shown me, to be honest. Normally he hides it in his bag. I never get to see it. But it was the school that had this chart in his school. He was year 5 then, so he was 9 or 10. And it was a picture of the book of Genesis next to a picture of Charles Darwin's On the Evolution of Life and all that. And the picture had the book of Genesis crossed out and the Darwin one ticked. And I thought, what's going on here? I mean, even in the Catholic school, you're secularizing stuff. And there's no conflict there, by the way. I mean, there's no conflict. In fact, they're complementary. They're complementary. The Genesis story is an evolution story. So from the point of view of theism, there's no problem. So even in a Catholic school in a small town in Wiltshire, the inculcation of secular and slightly left-wing values is going on. So maybe all this has accelerated my opinion that I should take Ben out of the school system. I don't know.
Didn't it used to be?
But when you have your children, Ronan, I would don't submit them to the awful vagaries of the state school system. And I'll tell you something else now. My little boy was placed with me when he was 3 years old for reasons I won't go into. But perhaps if we talk about the homelessness thing, if we've got time for that, I'll qualify that.
Of course.
And a social worker came round to make sure that she was happy that he was placed with me. And I was feeling mischievous. She was interviewing me. I can be mischievous. Perhaps you picked up on that. And she said to me, "So how do you think about what school he's going to go to?" And I said, I'm going to homeschool him, I think. And she looked at me and she went, what? And she was sat in my room, my study, that had about 2,000 books. I said, well, I reckon if he needs to learn how to smoke and swear, I can do that from here, can't I? And she started writing it down. I said, no, that's a joke. That's a joke. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would surrender. If I was going through it again, I'm not sure I'd surrender him to this awful education system we've got going on there, because it's an inculcation of left-wing dogmatism. They write nasty letters to Donald Trump once a term, saying, "Why aren't you doing this about climate change?" stuff, and they put the letters in the hallway of the school, saying, "Aren't we proud of writing that?" But they don't learn anything. No, they don't learn about proper history. They learn about, like you were saying, a revisionist version of history. But the teachers don't know anything. That's the problem. The teachers come out of teacher training college not having. They do what's it called, a PGCE or something. They'll do a first degree in something, come out with a PGCE, and they've got no appetite for their subject. They're just professionals. And my view about knowledge is that knowledge is out there, and it's our responsibility to hand it down to the next generation. But it doesn't suit what's going on in school. Do I sound like a fascist?
No, I consider the behaviour in our schools to be fascist. Communism, socialism, and fascism are all left-wing expressions, and they are all around us. And this idea that it is a teacher's job to press their political views onto children is morally repugnant, I think, actually. I really do.
But wasn't it interesting then? And I promise I won't interrupt you again, apart from just to make this point. When the sex education issue flared up, and there was, I'm not quite sure what northern town it was in, but the local Muslim community was saying, we don't want our kids to be taught this. And then the bien-pensant liberals didn't know which way to turn. Then, did they? Do we go with the liberal establishment, or where do we go? Because this whole postmodern structure of thought that seems to be something that we're all supposed to subscribe to is internally inconsistent, and it's going to give way. It's going to crack in certain places. And I hope when that, like the no platforming thing, it's absolutely ludicrous for a university like Oxford to say this person can't come and talk to us because we might get offended. Well, that's just nonsense, isn't it? I mean, the whole point of learning is to be offended. But we've got this, we've manufactured and we've acquiesced in this whole idea that people should never get offended, people should never learn new ideas. And having said I wouldn't interrupt you, I'm just rabbiting on, so I'll stop now.
It's all good, all good. I mean, the school you were talking about is in Birmingham. It's the internal contradictions of the multicultural state. I think they were teaching LGBT lessons in the school, and in the local Orthodox Islamic community wasn't too impressed. Surprise, surprise. Look, just for a moment, it always used to be that people would fight to get their kids into Catholic schools, even if they were not themselves Catholics, because Catholic schools are known for giving a rigorous education. And I think some of them even teach, to this day now, even teach Latin. Obviously, they always used to do that, but is that still the case now? Well, I suppose it's not. I mean, you just explained, haven't you, that we've got kids writing letters to a foreign leader in another country, encouraging him to sign up to climate change accords and so forth.
If we get to the point where we talk about my homelessness situation, I can give you a full answer. But that was one of the things on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what. We'll move on to Roger
Scruton, then homelessness.
I think
I can give you a really full answer to that question.
Right. Okay. Excellent.
Is that okay?
I mean, if you want to talk about homelessness now, we'll talk about homelessness, or we'll talk about Roger Scruton, whichever one you want.
Should we do Scruton first and then do homelessness?
Yeah, sounds good to me. Cool. So you knew Scruton, didn't you? And just excuse me, just 1 second, just for the benefit of people listening. I mean, I know who Roger Scruton is, and I've read Roger Scruton, probably not as much as you have, but for the benefit of people listening, who either do not know who he is, or who have had frightful lies pumped into them by the press. Who was Roger Scruton, and what in a very short summary was he all about?
Well, Roger Scruton was a British philosopher who was born in, I think, 1945 and died at the age of 75. So my math isn't very good, but he died in January. He wrote. He published 50 books. He used to write operas, and was basically a genius. But what was different about Roger Scruton when it comes to the academic life, is that he was one of the very, very few right-wing academics who were writing in the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and 90s, it was very difficult to be right-wing and an academic because of the march through the institutions that was going on there. I knew Roger. I sort of knew Roger. I knew him from conferences, and just before he died, I wrote a piece about him, which I think I sent to you, didn't I, Ronan? Yeah. Which he encouraged me to publish. I could phone him up and email him and whatever. He died of pancreatic cancer in January. He retired from the academy, from academic life, in about 1992, and bought a farm in Wiltshire, just up the road from where I am. So I used to bump into him there. His main areas of interest in philosophy were aesthetics. Music was his big thing, architecture, and he wrote a lot about sex. He wrote a big book called Sexual Desire, which I think was about 1983 or something, which was an essay in the philosophy of mind about what the nature of desire is. The guy was basically a genius. And the last 2 years of his life, he was invited by the Tory government to head a quango called Building Better, Building Beautiful, because like I say, Ronan, one of his interests was architecture, about the housing crisis in this country, and got shafted by an interview that he gave the New Statesman and got sacked by the Tory government. And the guy was absolutely a genius. He was a beautiful person in public, never smiled much because his humor was so dry, but was just an astonishing scholar and a brilliant person. And when he died in January, he left behind 2 children, which was tragic. What was brilliant about him? I said too much.
No, please continue.
What was brilliant about him was that he was one of the very few philosophers. I left the academy because I don't want to make this about me, but my area of interest was philosophy of mind. So I was reading people like Hilary Putnam, and who's a philosopher of mind, and various other people. With Roger, he would take an aspect of human experience, so sex, architecture, music was his big one, and write seriously brilliant books defending or explaining or inquiring about what our relationship is to those aspects of human experience. And when you say I knew him, I didn't know him that well. I don't think it's fair to say I knew him. But if I was to pick up the phone to him, he'd answer the phone. If I was to email him, he'd email me back. And he went to the same. Also, I think this is important to say, he basically got hounded out of the academy for being right-wing. He felt that he couldn't cope with it anymore. This was in the early 90s. But in the 80s, he set up, along with another Oxford philosopher called Cathy Wilkes, an underground university in Czechoslovakia, where they'd go out there and they would do underground seminars, and they'd smuggle books in. And that was a pretty brave thing to do when it came to Czechoslovakia in the 80s, because several times they got arrested, several times he got beaten up. And when he died, I made this point in an obituary I wrote for him, which I'm not sure if I sent you the obituary. I know I sent you another one. Okay. That all these people who were slagging him off as being some kind of right-wing fanatic weren't fit to lick his boots, because he'd actually gone out there and done the proper stuff at great personal cost. He also went to the same school as me. He was 20 years ahead of me. Got expelled for setting fire to the curtain in the assembly room while he was putting on a review, R-E-V-U-E review, that type of review, and was renowned for that, but he didn't care because he'd already got his scholarship to Cambridge. But the guy was basically brilliant. And a huge range of reference. He wrote books on everything, including, by the way, heavy metal.
Heavy metal? I didn't know that.
He wrote a book called, sorry?
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he took stuff seriously. I mean, he wrote a book called The Aesthetics of Music. And that book was basically, I couldn't understand it because I had the philosophy bit, I didn't have the music bit. So half of his argument was written down in musical form. And I can't hear that stuff in my head because I'm not that talented when it comes to music. Yeah, but the other half of it was written down in terms of analytical philosophy, which I do understand. And I gave a copy of this book to my late father and said, "You have a go at this because you understand the music." And I said to him, "I think the only person who possibly understand this book is Roger Scruton himself, because you need a combination of someone who's a musical genius and someone who's a philosophical genius." But I hope that's a reasonable summary. He was a pupil of Elizabeth Anscombe at Cambridge, who was a pupil of Wittgenstein. So there's, Wittgenstein, the best philosopher probably in the last 200 years in the Anglo analytical tradition. But he was a lovely guy, but vilified. And the Tory government year before last, they basically dumped on him. And the last email I got from him, he implied that it had affected his health, that James Brokenshire in particular, who was a housing minister, had sacked him on the basis of a New Statesman interview. Shall I pause now?
Oh, that's a brilliant summary. Yeah,
it wasn't a very short one though, was it?
Oh, it doesn't need to be. Look, the treatment of Roger Scruton in his final years was appalling. It shamed the Conservative Party, and it has not, to my knowledge, apologised. Has it? Did James Brokenshire apologise for what he did?
He did.
Was it mealy-mouthed?
He did apologise. He did apologise. And I remember Roger Scruton was being asked by... I want to mention Toby Young here. It was Toby Young who actually retrieved the New Statesman interview tapes and put them up there. I don't know how Toby got them, but he put them up there and said, this guy called James Eaton, I think, who writes for the New Statesman.
George Eaton.
Was it George?
It's George Eaton, he's called.
So, yeah. But Toby fought Roger's corner really well, and they did the government, James Brokenshire, did apologise in the end. And Roger Scruton said at one point, when he was asked, I think it was by Toby, it was either by Toby or Douglas Murray, one of those two, would you forgive George Eaton and the New Statesman? And Roger, being Roger, said, I would like to help them out of their embarrassment. But he was with. I mean, I didn't know him as well as Toby and Douglas, but I knew him a little bit. If I could pick up the phone to him and to his secretary Izzy and talk to them. But he was really, really hurt, not by the New Statesman thing, but by the fact that Brokenshire, etc., basically dumped on them. Because he spent a fair part of his professional career trying to give an intellectual justification to what conservatism is. He thought he'd done his bit. And I think he felt it keenly when the Tory party basically, without reading his stuff, dumped on him. So that was tragic. So that was, whether that contributed to his eventual health decline or not, I don't know. But it's tragic to think that that was on his mind while he was getting sick, because he deserved better than that from people who, incidentally, would not be capable of understanding his work. I mean, the idea that James Brokenshire and people like that would be sitting there reading his books on sexual desire and architecture, I don't think so. I don't think these people are capable of it. So I'm getting a bit angry because I think it was a disgrace the way he was treated, to be honest. Maybe we can get onto this in the next bit if we've got time, but I used to email, when I was in a homeless hostel in Salisbury, I had email contact with Roger, and he knew where I was, and I was reading one of his books, a book called The Soul of the World, in which he defends a kind of neo-Kantian view about the nature of what we are. And I was going through this book thinking, I'm not sure I agree with that. I don't understand that. And I would email him, and within 2 hours I'd get a reply, and a reply of several paragraphs, not a reply of get lost. But this is what I meant by this, and thank you for your inquiry. So, I was fond of him. Yeah. And the people, I'm getting upset now. I'm upset that he's died, but he was a far better person than any of his critics.
I think it warrants anger, and I find it shocking that now. And I do know that Roger Scruton wasn't bothered by George Eaton, but I think that we should be. I mean, the Tory party is a left-wing party. I don't think that anyone, if anyone is in any denial about that, then they need to disabuse themselves of it, because that is a left-wing party. It's nothing to do with conservatism, nothing to do with classical liberalism, everything to do with a sort of soft form of corporate socialism.
Yeah.
But I think journalists and people who care about truth telling should be deeply concerned and annoyed that George Eaton continues to practice. I think that he's a little shit, and that he shouldn't be working in journalism anymore. He should be done, finished, blacklisted, out, done. Off you go.
Is he still working for the New Statesman?
I believe he's still working for the New Statesman, yeah. And he continues to have a job. I'm sorry, but that is not acceptable.
He's an intellectual pygmy compared to Scruton. And I think Scruton wasn't really that concerned about him. He was more concerned about the way the... And I think this is the other thing. Possibly Eaton doesn't know this, but Scruton used to write a wine column for the New Statesman once a week. He was there. To be fair to the New Statesman, they invited him to write a wine column. Scruton was into wine and stuff. It's one of the things he was interested in. He wrote a book called I Drink, Therefore I Am. And in that wine column, he would smuggle in various, from the point of view of the New Statesman, reactionary, subversive, conservative ideas. And that was kind of the interaction he had with the editor of the New Statesman, and they knew what he was doing, and he did it brilliantly, because he was apart from being a brilliant philosopher, a brilliant writer. It'd be like, but it kind of sullied that relationship from my point of view. That someone like Eaton can come along and do that and do a hatchet job on it. Well, what the New Statesman editors thinking that relationship could be fractured? They had a. Anyway, I get sad when I think about this because I think the last year of Roger's wife was entirely compromised by this, in terms of his own point of view, and I think he was seriously hurt. And he was a man who was perfectly capable of giving off the opinion that he didn't really care what people said, but he did. He did care, and he found it difficult. He was writing these, like in the 80s and the 90s, these right-wing tracks. It did hurt him that people were accusing him of all sorts of moral failure, because Roger was from a very working class background. He was brought up in High Wycombe, which is where I was brought up. He went to the High Wycombe Royal Grammar School, where I went. His father, Jack Scruton, was a Manchester. He'd been a primary school teacher in Manchester, and the war had intervened and all that. His mother was called Beryl. Roger's father didn't want music in the house because he didn't want his kids to do any better than he had. And Roger had a huge not resentment, that's the wrong way of putting it, a huge, I don't know, a complicated view about his own dad. This was someone who was brought up with no, silver spoon in his mouth. And when Roger got the Jesus College Cambridge scholarship, his dad cut him off because he didn't want him to do any better than he had. And all these people who've gone through Oxford, Cambridge, from reasonably good backgrounds, gone into special advisors groups, and then all come up through that way, they're not fit to actually criticise him, really. Also, they're not bright enough. And I think he was hurt.
I'm not surprised. Interesting. I didn't realise this until recently, that Paul Johnson used to edit the New Statesman. Paul Johnson, the historian and journalist. He's also from Manchester.
His son's my boss.
Exactly.
His son's my boss at the article.
He's from Manchester too, Paul Johnson.
I didn't know he's from Manchester.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was a connection there with Sir Roger's wine column. But actually, as an aside, I haven't heard anything from Paul Johnson in quite some time. He's very old at this point, I think.
Well, he's about 80 old, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, his son Daniel's my boss. So, I spoke to him early on today.
Yep.
The sons and Luke is the other son, who runs Pizza Express. We've got the right Johnsons, haven't we?
Yeah, we do, of course, because Daniel Johnston's also editor of Standpoint
Yes.
magazine as well. Yeah, no, we do.
And the Critic, he's associate editor there as well.
Yes, exactly. No, we have the same Johnston. Paul Johnston was, for people listening, a brilliant journalist and historian of many books. Some of them superb short biographies of people like Joseph Stalin, and he wrote a fantastic book called History of the English Peoples from the late 1970s, which is...
That is a brilliant book.
Fantastically written, polemical view of English peoples of the sort that doesn't get written today because it would be considered politically imprudent to do so.
Kingsley Amis likes that book, and Kingsley Amis didn't like anyone else writing stuff better than him. Yeah, so that's how good that book is.
Yeah, it's a fantastic book, and you pick it up on Amazon for two or three.
No, but I know Daniel because he's my boss. And,
yeah.
But Paul is still with us, I think, isn't he?
I believe. I mean, I would have heard that he died. I'd expect to anyway, you know. But I know I haven't seen anything out from him in many years. The last time I saw anything of Paul Johnson, he was giving an interview on C-SPAN. He was quite old at that point. But anyway, I was a brilliant guy. Sorry, a bit of a diversion there for a moment.
No, that's fine.
You know, I'm with you on Roger Scruton. The way he was treated was appalling. It shamed the Tory party. Take it away from George Eaton. I mean, I was an aspiring journalist. I care a lot about journalism, so my natural inclination is to attack Eaton. But the Tory party, James Brokenshire, and also Johnny Mercer, someone else who I mean,
who I liked prior to that, by the way.
Right. I mean, they threw him under the bus, and they didn't even bother to check first. You know, I mean, I would immediately have said, "Whoa, where did this accusation come from?" The New Statesman. Give me the article. Let me have a look. Yeah, that's pap. You know, go and get the transcripts. Bring the transcripts from the interview, and we'll go from there. And the problem goes away. But they just automatically got down on their knees for the left, just like that. And they set a very dangerous precedent there, perhaps, because that was a particularly high profile cancelling, really within Britain. I know that outside of here we've had significant figures cancelled in the United States, for example, but within Britain and within the conservative establishment, that was a big scalp for the radical left, and they took it without any resistance whatsoever. That was a huge mistake, I think, and it was the final nail in the coffin for that party.
And you don't need to do that much research, because Roger Scruton has written books about the nature of Islam, sympathetic to it.
Sorry, one sec. Just for the sake of listeners, so they don't think that's a non sequitur. Roger Scruton was accused of anti-Semitism and of so-called Islamophobia. And that's basically what he was accused of by Eaton in his piece. And Eaton took a load of things that Scruton had said totally out of context and misrepresented what he was saying. So sorry, please continue.
No, that's fine. But Scruton wrote long essays about the nature of Islam, very, very sympathetic ones as well. He read the Quran. His main argument, his main problem with Muslims is that they didn't drink. But there's, should I have said that? But if you go on YouTube, I mean, there's loads of interviews that Roger Scruton was giving with Islamic scholars, and they were very, very convivial interviews. And Scruton took the Islamic faith very seriously, as you have to, because it's one of the other monotheistic faiths. His his questioning about Islam was about how that distinguishes itself from Christianity. You know, the answer to that is to do with the resurrection. But this was a religion that Scruton had taken really seriously and written serious stuff about. And the people who slagged him off for being Islamophobes probably hadn't picked up the Quran in their life. And ditto with the anti-Semitism. The anti-Semitism thing came about, I think it was to do with
Orban, wasn't it?
Hungary, wasn't it? And Soros
yeah.
and Central University and whatever. Well, I mean, I think that was nonsense as well. I cover that in my article if people want to read that. The homophobia, well, the guy wasn't like that. You know, he wrote a book called Sexual Desire, in which he said that the nature of desire isn't, as most of us like to think, part of it's not part of our groin. Desire is part of the structure of our thought. And when we desire as humans someone else, then we're interplaying with them in a certain way, which is the nature of thought. And he drew certain conclusions from that, which are now not standard. But he was, I don't know, he was. I did, like I said, I didn't know him that well, but he was a kind, decent bloke who didn't have a prejudiced bone in his body, from any of my interactions. And these people who basically hung him out to dry a couple of years ago they just didn't. They were just not bright enough to engage with him. Simple as that.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, what would he have said about current events? What do you think?
I think that's a really good question. I was dreading you asking me that. I think what he would have said.
Well, I mean, I am asking you to put words in
I've got.
dead
I
man's
think
mouth.
one of the things he would have said, Ronan, is that we're getting too worried about death.
Yeah.
And we're not. You know, death is becoming promoted as the worst thing that can ever happen to you. And a few times Roger wrote articles saying, death is not the worst thing that can happen to you, but death is something that should inform you in day to day. But I don't know. I think he would be flabbergasted, to be honest, like any intelligent person should be. But Roger Scruton had, dare I say, a far more subtle, deep, and fluid mind than I have. So I don't know. But I know his attitude towards death was that people think it's the worst thing that can happen, and maybe that's kind of what's captured the mindset of the country at the moment. But no, he was a good guy, and he said after having written 50 books and 1,000 articles and written operas and all of that, that he wanted to be remembered as the guy who played the organ in his local church on a Sunday morning. So, and he was genuine about that. He was genuinely modest. So,
Yeah,
I don't know what you think about now. I suppose
he's missed, isn't he? You know, he really is. And we don't have
Sorry?
many. He's missed, obviously. You know, I imagine especially so for people who knew him. Obviously,
Well, we won't get any more
didn't.
books from him, so I miss him.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it'd be lovely to read a £800, 800 word article from the Times to hear what he thinks about this nonsense. But
yeah.
so he was one of these people who would just surprise you in what he says. So I don't know what he'd say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting, and I think that people listening can go away and, you know, I've read only 2 books by Roger Scruton. One was Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands, which relates to his experiences in the 80s and early 90s in academia, which you referred to earlier. And the other is The Uses of Pessimism, a much more recent book, which is short and accessible, and I recommend it especially for its description of our relationship with the European Union and the internal contradictions of the European Union, which was enlightening for me, because I didn't realize just how absurd the European Union is in all kinds of ways. So I recommend reading that. And yeah, are you any recommendations for anyone listening?
Yeah, Gentle Regrets by Roger Scruton, which is his kind of intellectual autobiography. But it's a very, very short book, and he kind of talks about how he ended up on the right. That's a brilliant, brilliant book. The one I mentioned earlier, The Soul of the World, in which he's talking about his basic worldview, slightly more complicated, I suppose, than Gentle Regrets, but those two would be the ones where I'd kick on.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about your. It's a bit more personal, this, and I know you're eager to talk about it, and other people are eager to hear about it too. And I think that some people will find it, a lot of people will find it quite inspiring that you've been able to. Well, look, I'll let you tell people homelessness and your own experiences with it. Please share.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. If I get too boring, interrupt, please.
I don't think that's going to happen. Please.
Okay. Part of the reason I came off Twitter is that I'm a recovering alcoholic, which means that if I see in myself certain patterns of behaviour, I need to back off and go and speak to my sponsor. 2015, I basically drank myself homeless in Warminster in Wiltshire. I didn't just drink myself homeless though, I drank my then 6-year-old boy homeless, who had to go and live with my family, and I was street homeless for many months. I found my way back into life through a couple of homeless hostels, one in Bath and one in Salisbury. I won't name the one in Bath because I didn't like it, and I don't think it's fair to mention it. But the one in Salisbury was a charity called the Labyrinth. Found my way into Alcoholics Anonymous, and had a serious, more or less 2 years before my little boy was able to come back to me. Yeah, so I've been street homeless, hostel homeless, and in some ways it's the best thing that's ever happened to me. In other ways it's not, because my little boy was away from me for 2 years. So that's the general framework. So I have views about homelessness. I have views about alcoholism. I have views about AA. Where do you want to go, Ronan? Is that enough for you?
maybe you could maybe offer a bit of insight into how people end up in that position. You say you drank yourself homeless. Can you elaborate on exactly what that looks like? How do you get to the position where you no longer have a home? Because I think most people tend to assume that homelessness is something that happens almost exclusively to people of lower educational achievement, and obviously you're of quite high educational achievement. You've got a PhD. It's very high educational achievement indeed. So people could be, people would be baffled by that, perhaps. I mean, I'm not baffled by it, but I think
in my case, it was the alcoholism. And the alcoholism doesn't just mean that you want to drink all the time. It means that you look at the world in a certain skewed way. But a lot of the people that I met who are homeless, with them, it was often they were ex-forces people. They've been sent out by our government to kill people, and then they came back, left the army, and the government didn't want anything to do with them. And Wiltshire is which is the county I live in, is a very military county, so that these people just said, stuff you to the government, we'll live in the woods. So there was that. In my own case, it was the alcoholism. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to talk about this, because I want to help other people. I became an alcoholic when I was probably about 23 years old. When I was doing well at university, and I was looking around at people, thinking, who can I go for a drink with? Who can I go for a drink with? But I don't think alcoholism is just about having drunk too much. I think there is something inside you that makes you an alcoholic. It makes you needy. It makes you addicted as a personality. And it's a disease. I mean, it's horrific. And I'll tell you something now. And I've shut the door so my little boy can't hear me. 2015, November 2015, when I had finally drunk both of us homeless, my mum had to come and collect him. And she lived 100 miles away. So she came and collected Ben to take him away to see what was going to happen. And do you know what my first thought was there, Ronan? Not about my child, but about, oh, good, I can go to the pub now. That's how bad it was. This is how bad this disease is.
Yeah.
So I take alcoholism to be seriously a disease. I got myself into AA. Becoming homeless was, like I say, at that point, the best thing that could happen to me. I got myself into Alcoholics Anonymous, started working the program, and you have to work it, otherwise it doesn't work. And I met some of the most beautiful and brilliant people ever. And within a year or so, actually it took 2 years, sorry, for Ben to come back to me, but there were reconciliations happening between me and my family, and it was a beautiful period of time, apart from the fact that my little boy was dislocated and, you know, in a quandary about when he's coming back to his dad. And if it hadn't been for that charity in Salisbury, Elaborate, I'm not sure he would have come back to me.
They gave you a lot of support.
They were absolutely, utterly fantastic, non-judgmental. You couldn't get away with everything. I mean, but they were absolutely fantastic. And it was started by a guy called, am I allowed to say what his name is?
Of course.
Yeah. Elaborate is a charity for the homeless based in Salisbury, but not just for the homeless. They also do, they've got properties for ex-service people suffering from PTSD. They've got 2 homes for people who are suffering from domestic violence. They're all over the southwest of England, actually. So anyone listening to this, please give it a donation to Elaborate, even if it's just a sleeping bag, okay? But the way they started was a guy called John Proctor, who's actually the deacon at the church, St Osmond's in Salisbury, who found someone who was drunk in the road and said, well, I can't have that, come back and stay at my house. And he felt called then. He felt God was calling him to actually start this thing and move on and move on and move on. And it's become a multi-million-pound charity that helps thousands and thousands of people. If it wasn't for that charity, I wouldn't be here now. At one point, Ronan, I had to move into the hostel in Salisbury. And it was almost like a Premier Inn. You know, it had only been built 20 years before, and it was ensuite rooms and all of that. And then they moved me on from there because I was slightly older than a lot of the people who were staying there, to give me a flat in the centre of Salisbury, which probably on the open market would have been £500,000. That's how brilliant this charity is.
Wow.
So anyway, at that point, I was going to AA meetings, and I've met some of the most beautiful and wonderful people in the world through AA, and I can't endorse AA enough. And if anyone's got a problem with alcohol, go to AA. Go and do it, because all you'll do is meet love. It's an astonishing movement, an astonishing fellowship. Have I said too much?
No, I'm staying quiet and letting you share your story. It's amazing that you've managed to get yourself back from the brink like that.
I haven't. That's the point. I haven't done anything. other people have helped me through it.
But that's I don't think it's possible, is it, to do nothing? You can have support, but ultimately you're the one who has gotten yourself to where you are. I'm sure they would say the same thing to you. I've no personal experience with the 12 steps, which is the philosophy of the Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous,
Yeah.
of course. But I think personal responsibility is one of the keys, isn't it?
Yes.
And you've obviously done that. You know where you could be where you are. I think you're being unduly modest.
That's the point I should have made. Actually, you've made it for me. It's structured into the 12 steps that you are responsible at every single moment for what's going on. It's not. And I had this argument with my brother, with whom I'd fallen out really badly when I was drinking really badly. And he says it's not good enough just to go to AA and say you can write off the past. And I said to him, that's not what the 12 steps is about. The 12 steps is saying to you that every given day, every given moment, you have to work. You know, it's structured by responsibility, isn't it? So yeah, you've expressed that better than me.
Look,
But no, it's the most fantastic fellowship ever. And I'll just say one thing about that. When my mother cut me off completely after she was looking after my little boy, she didn't want to have any contact with me for months. And my sponsor, and well, my mum and I are very good together now. Ben's back with me, and my AA sponsor goes to stay in my mum's villa in Spain.
Wow.
So it was a kind of, you know, God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he? But you know, at least he's working. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Hey, no, not at all. And you're working with people who are homeless and alcoholic, or just homeless. What's the situation? Or is it at the same charity?
It is, yeah. It's the part of the charity I work for now is a charity. Is a house. I have to be careful what I say because I can't identify where it is, but it's for young people aged between 16 and 25 who've been made homeless by their parents and whatever. So then they're not necessarily drug addicts or alcoholics, but they're just people in need of a roof over their heads.
Yeah.
And the Elaborate charity covers that as well. But I can't tell you where that is.
No, it's I live up north anyway, so
no, but
quite a distance from there. I will actually put, if you want, in the comment section below, in the description, excuse me, a link to the charity. So if anyone would like to send a donation, then they can do so. People become homeless for a lot of different reasons, don't they? It's funny you say 16 to 25-year-olds. What kind of causes are behind 16 to 25-year-olds ending up in a charity hostel?
It was difficult in a hostel I was in Salisbury because you weren't allowed in unless you were 18. But the reasons I know from the other place I volunteer at is domestic violence between parents and children are booted out. People run away. They find themselves on drugs and they've got nowhere to go back to. Just the normal systems of human tragedy, to be honest, Ronan, which, you know, these are tragedies that can affect you when you're 14, but when you're 16, the state might be disinclined to look after you, especially when there are systems of support, charity systems of support, which are available. So when I was homeless, it was very, very rare for everybody to have the same story. I mean, alcohol was involved in my case, drugs was involved in someone else's case, alcohol in someone else's case, but it was never that clear cut. And in each of those three conditions, there'd be this person who was capable of kindness, this person who could be nasty, and this person who was, didn't know where they were. It's difficult. It's just so difficult. But when you're talking about people between the ages of 60 and 25, it's a tragedy if they've been booted out of their home. If that happens, that is tragic. And when that happens, that's the time I feel really bad about it. But I only volunteer for about 15 hours a week. So, I'm no martyr to this, really. And also, I'm 53 years old. And I'm 53 years old, and these are people who are kind of basically kids, so they don't really want to be around an old person like me. So I'll go down there and help in the kitchen, and I'll help in, I'll help in the garden, and they'll laugh at me for being overweight, this old bloke and whatever, which is fine. Don't mind that. That's me doing my bit. And the elaborate charity is getting these people on track, because what they do is, from that specific place, they'll feed them into the hostel situation in Salisbury, and make sure that they're getting, the stuff they need, the support they need. In some ways, I'm privileged to have been homeless, but that sounds like a weird thing to say, doesn't it?
You're Catholic. I wonder, is that? I have quite a few Catholic family members, especially on my mother's side of the family, and I do see the tendency in them to find silver lining to clouds quite a lot, and they do take that view that, well, I've suffered, and that was actually a good thing. Is that informed, do you think, by your Catholicism? That view?
I don't like to see suffering, because suffering's always attached to a person. I don't care who is suffering. I don't even care. It's like when Simon Cowell fell off his bike the other day, and people were laughing about that, and I was thinking, well,
people laughing about it.
Sorry?
People laughing about it. Didn't he nearly severed his spinal column?
Some people were sorry?
He nearly severed his spinal column. That's
Well, exactly. So I don't like laughing at suffering particularly. I don't care who it is that's suffering, because it's still suffering. But some people were laughing at that. They were saying, "Oh, he deserves it," and I was thinking, well, why on earth would you think that?
He deserves to have a broken back. What? Like, I don't like Simon Cowell very much. I find him to be a sort of smug narcissist. But I don't think, he deserves a broken back.
Were. Ronan, you don't think I'm saying that I think Simon Cowell deserved to have a broken back? Because I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying I didn't like the reaction to the fact that he got it.
No, I don't think you're saying that. I'm just astonished that people could be so twisted. I mean, I shouldn't be astonished. I see the most disgusting things online, especially all the time. Comments that are just. Anyway, yeah, it's always a terrible thing when people are suffering. We shouldn't gloat.
I wouldn't even wish it on Matt Hancock.
Well, steady on.
well.
No,
all right. Shut up, Sean.
For the benefit of those listening, we're not actually advocating harm or suffering to come to Mr. Matt Hancock. Not entirely, anyway.
Absolutely not. I don't wish harm on anyone. What was the question?
I was curious. You made a comment about your ordeal being good for you, and I was curious as to whether that was informed by your Catholicism. But I might be thinking about that a little bit too deeply.
No, you're not. It's a fair point. Fair question. No, there was one. No, Easter 2017. Easter? Yes, it was Easter 2017. Myself and my little boy went to the Easter Vigil at the Catholic Church in Salisbury, and I was lapsed at this point. I'd been made not been made homeless. I've drunk myself homeless and all that. And I came out of that Easter Vigil reinvigorated in my faith. I don't like to see people suffer. I don't think the Catholic faith is about suffering. I think it's about how you deal with it. But I suppose I've been through the mill a little bit emotionally. I put my little boy through it as well. So suffering is something you have to learn to deal with, isn't it? I mean, you have to, what's the appropriate response? Forget about it or embrace it? Embrace it. And if God's there for you, then he'll absolve the suffering. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I try and look at the world through a religious framework, not a secular one. And I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But bless you. Just sneeze. I don't think suffering's. I mean, I don't want people to suffer, but we have to be realistic. Suffering happens, doesn't it? So it's what framework you've got around it, I think. And I think if you're religious, you've got a little bit more of a framework than if you're not. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But some of the people, going back to the homelessness, some of the best people I've ever met in my life have been street homeless people. And some of the other best people of my life have been the people in homeless hostels who have to deal with them. It's a kind of very, very strange subculture. And I'm glad I went through it because I was a horrible bastard before I did. I was arrogant. I was alcoholic. I was thinking everyone would come to my rescue because I was such a genius. And none of this, it taught me a lesson. But unfortunately, it meant that my little boy didn't have a father for 2 years. He's now back with me now, but that's the way it was then.
Well, and that's quite an inspiring story, and I think maybe that's about an hour and a half now. Maybe that's a good point to stop. What do you think?
Up to you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. I think we'll definitely continue again. You've not depressed me at all. Look, if someone can come back from the street and having lost their child and to get back on their feet, get the child back, if that can happen, then I mean, anything can really. I mean, who knows? Maybe we can regain our liberty in this country from these authoritarians who are currently stamping on us.
Can I tell you a story before you go?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I was thinking about this last night. I live in Devizes, and we've still got some homelessness here, which I try to help out with. And I'm not going to say what their name is, but there's a guy who you always know where he is, and he's asking for money. And just before Christmas, my little boy said to me, "Can I go and give him some money?" And I said, I gave Ben a fiver and said, "Is that what you want to do?" And Ben says, yeah, I want to go and give him some money because he's homeless like you were. And I said, okay. My instinct was to say to him, no, spend it on something else. But I didn't want to crush my little boy's charitable impulse, if that makes sense. So anyway, Ben's gone up and given this guy a £5. This was just before Christmas. The week after Christmas, this guy's come running up to us and said, can I give this to Ben? And he's given Ben a £5. I said, thank you for that. And I hope you have a happy new year. So there's, that is the wonderful thing about spiritual physics is that no matter how much you are in the gutter, which I have been, if someone offers you kindness, the first thing you want to do is repay it when you can. I'm filling up there. I didn't expect it.
No, that's a beautiful story and wise words. Thank you.
That's okay, Ronan. So we'll speak soon.
We will indeed. Thank you again, Sean. And for
Take
everyone
care.
listening, I will put some links in the description below.